I'm Delia, 34, a graphic designer whose mother just screamed that she hated me in our family kitchen. The same kitchen where I once drew pictures she never put on the fridge. My successful career in New York means nothing here in Pennsylvania, where I've always been the disappointment daughter. What I did next surprised everyone, especially myself. Before I share what happened next, let me know where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe if my story resonates with you. Growing up in Millfield, Pennsylvania, a town where everyone knew everyone, should have felt comforting. Instead, it felt like living under a microscope, especially with a mother like Janet. From my earliest memories, nothing I did was ever quite good enough for her. She criticized everything from my artwork to my choice of friends, always with that disappointed sigh that cut deeper than any words could. "Delia, why can't you sit properly like Amanda?" she would say, referring to my younger sister, who always seemed to know exactly how to please our mother. "Delia, that drawing is nice, but wouldn't you rather learn something practical?" The dismissals were constant, wearing away at my confidence like water on stone. My father, Robert, was different. He was kind, with gentle eyes that crinkled when he smiled at my creative projects. "That's really something, Delia," he would say, genuinely impressed by whatever colorful creation I'd made. But his kindness came with a fatal flaw: he never stood up to my mother. He would watch her criticism with a pained expression, but would offer only private consolation afterward, never public defense. Then there was Amanda, 2 years younger, and seemingly perfect in every way. She had my mother's practical mind and social grace. Where I was awkward and dreamy, Amanda was poised and focused. She played sports, joined the right clubs, and brought home the kind of friends my mother approved of. I never resented my sister for this. How could I? She was just playing the game better than I could. Family gatherings were exercises in invisibility. At Thanksgiving, my mother would parade Amanda around to relatives, highlighting her achievements while I helped in the kitchen, or sat quietly with my sketchbook. "Amanda made honor roll again," she would announce proudly, while my art contest wins went unmentioned. I showed early talent for art and design. When I was 11, my art teacher, Mrs. Lawson, called my parents in specifically to discuss my exceptional visual spatial skills and remarkable color sense. My father beamed. My mother nodded politely, then asked about my math performance on the drive home. "Art is a hobby, Delia, not a career," she told me countless times during high school. "You need something stable. What about accounting or nursing?" Amanda is thinking about pre-med. The pressure to conform to her vision was relentless. She had it all mapped out: college, nearby a practical degree, marriage to a local boy, grandchildren she could show off at church. So it felt like both rebellion and salvation. When I applied to design schools in secret, using money from my after-school job to pay for applications. When the acceptance letter from Parsons School of Design in New York came with a partial scholarship, I finally had my ticket out. The argument that followed was epic. "You're throwing your life away on doodles," she had screamed. My father had tried to mediate, suggesting that maybe New York would be good for me. Amanda had watched silently from the staircase, her eyes wide. I left for New York a week after high school graduation. The distance should have helped, but it only changed the nature of the criticism. Phone calls became landmines of passive-aggressive comments. "Your cousin Sarah just got engaged, she's only a year older than you." Or, "I saw your Facebook photos. That apartment looks interesting. Are those areas safe?" Visits home for holidays were worse. The familiar pattern would play out: initial politeness giving way to thinly veiled criticisms, escalating to arguments ending with me leaving earlier than planned. After each visit, I would promise myself it would be the last, but some sense of obligation always pulled me back. My career flourished despite her predictions. By 30, I was a senior designer at a respected agency, working with major clients and mentoring junior designers. My apartment in Brooklyn wasn't huge, but it was mine, filled with art and color and free from criticism. I dated occasionally, but valued my independence too much to settle. My life was good in New York. I had friends who appreciated me, colleagues who respected me, and enough distance from my family to maintain my sanity. But family has a way of pulling you back in no matter how far you run. The call came on a Tuesday in March. My father had suffered a minor heart attack. He was stable, but the doctor had recommended lifestyle changes and rest. My mother couldn't handle everything alone, and Amanda was pregnant with her first child and dealing with severe morning sickness. Could I come home to help? Just for a little while. I hadn't been back to Millfield in 5 years, not since that Christmas when my mother had criticized my haircut, my weight, my lack of a serious relationship, and finally, my wasteful career choice, all before the turkey was even served. I'd walked out, checked into the Holiday Inn, and left the next morning. But this was different. This was my dad. Of course I'll come, I said, already mentally rearranging my life. My boss was understanding, allowing me to work remotely. My apartment could be sublet. Within a week, I was driving my packed car back to Pennsylvania, feeling like I was 16 again. The house looked exactly the same, a colonial-style home with blue shutters and a porch swing where I used to read for hours. My old bedroom, however, had been partially converted into a sewing room, with only a twin bed remaining to indicate it had once been mine. Amanda's room, I noticed later, remained pristine, like a shrine to her adolescence. "We didn't think you'd be back," my mother said when she saw my expression. "You can clear some space if you need to." The first few days were awkward but manageable. I focused on my father, who looked smaller somehow, his robust frame diminished by hospital sheets, and then by the recliner where he spent most of his time recovering at home. He was genuinely happy to see me holding my hand and telling me how good it was to have his creative girl back home. My mother maintained a strained politeness, but cracks appeared quickly. "Do you have to work such long hours?" she asked on my third day, finding me at my laptop at 7 in the evening. "It's not healthy to stare at screens all day." "This is my job, Mom," I replied, trying to keep my voice even. "The job that pays my bills and actually helps me contribute to household expenses while I'm here." She pursed her lips. "Well, Amanda manages to have a career and still have dinner with her husband every night at 6. And so it began again. As days turned into weeks, the criticisms multiplied. My vegetarian diet was attention-seeking. My work calls were disruptive. My clothes were too urban for Millfield. Nothing had changed in the years I'd been gone, except perhaps my tolerance for it had diminished. Amanda visited occasionally, her pregnancy now showing. She was polite but distant, as if afraid my outsider status might be contagious. We had never been close separated, not just by our differences, but by our mother's obvious favoritism. Now, with her perfect life taking shape, the divide seemed even greater. "You should come to the house for dinner sometime," I offered one afternoon as she was leaving. "Maybe," she replied noncommittally. "Brad's been working late and I get so tired with the baby and all." Her hand rested protectively on her slightly rounded belly. I tried to connect with old friends, but most had moved away, or were deep into family lives that left little room for reconnecting with the girl who'd fled town. Only Mrs. Kravitz next door, who had always slipped me cookies when I was hiding from family arguments, seemed genuinely pleased to see me. "You look wonderful, Delia," she said, inviting me in for coffee. "New York must agree with you." It was a small kindness, but in the desert of my homecoming, it felt like a feast. Meanwhile, the town itself had changed in subtle ways that emphasized my outsider status. The diner where I'd spent countless hours sketching had been replaced by a chain restaurant. The old art supply store was now a vape shop. Even the park where I used to escape had been redesigned, the quiet corner where I'd read now occupied by a noisy playground. Between caring for my father, enduring my mother, and trying to maintain my workload, the stress began to take its toll. I missed deadlines for the first time in my career. My normally impeccable designs needed multiple revisions. My boss was patient, but concerned. "Take whatever time you need for your family, Delia," she said during our weekly check-in, "but don't lose yourself in the process." Easier said than done when everything and everyone seemed determined to remind me of who I'd been rather than who I'd become. The real trouble started with the Hartman account. It was a major client, a sustainable furniture company looking to rebrand. Under normal circumstances, it would have been challenging, but manageable. In my parents' house, with my mother's constant interruptions and passive-aggressive comments, it became nearly impossible. "Are you still on that computer?" she would ask, barging into my room without knocking during client calls. Or she would vacuum right outside my door during crucial creative sessions. When I requested some quiet time for an important presentation, she rolled her eyes. We can't all put our lives on hold for your little drawings. My breaking point came closer with each dismissive comment. The family dinner was supposedly to celebrate my father's improving health, but it quickly became evident that it was really about showcasing Amanda's pregnancy to our extended family. Aunts, uncles, and cousins crowded around her, exclaiming over her tiny baby bump, while my mother beamed proudly. "Another generation of our family," she announced, raising her glass in a toast. "And Amanda will be such a wonderful mother." I smiled and nodded, helping to serve food and clean up, while the conversation swirled around topics I had little to contribute to: local schools, mutual friends. I'd lost touch with Amanda's nursery plans. No one asked about my life in New York or my work, except for Uncle Jim's dismissive, "Still doing that art thing, huh?" When Amanda announced she and Brad had set a wedding date, moving it up so she wouldn't be too pregnant in the photos, the excitement reached fever pitch. My mother immediately launched into planning mode. "We'll need to book the country club right away," she said. "And Delia, you can help with some of the design elements. That's right up your alley, isn't it?" It was the closest thing to acknowledging my career she'd offered since I'd arrived, but the condescension in her tone was unmistakable. Still, I agreed to help, hoping it might be a way to bridge the gap between us. The next morning brought 3 critical client calls, all scheduled during times I'd carefully blocked off on the family calendar. Despite this, my mother interrupted each one first to ask if I wanted lunch, pushing open the door during a presentation, then to discuss flower arrangements for Amanda's wedding, calling up the stairs while I was in a feedback session, and finally to complain about the dishwasher while I was trying to salvage the increasingly frustrated client relationship. By late afternoon, I was barely holding it together. My boss had emailed expressing concern about client feedback. My designs were being questioned. The professional reputation I'd worked years to build was crumbling around me. Then my mother knocked on my door again. "Delia, I need you to run to the store. We're out of Amanda's favorite tea, and she's coming for dinner to discuss wedding plans." I took a deep breath. "Mom, I can't right now. I'm trying to fix these designs before my deadline tomorrow." "It's just a quick trip," she persisted. "Surely your little project can wait." "It's not a little project, it's my career. A career that pays very well, and that I've worked incredibly hard for." She sighed that familiar sigh. "If you'd chosen something more practical, like I suggested, you wouldn't be so stressed about drawings." Something snapped inside me. Years of dismissal, of comparison, of never being good enough erupted at once. "They're not just drawings. This is professional design work for major clients. Why can't you see that what I do matters?" "What matters is family," she shot back. "Something you've never understood. Amanda would never put her work before family needs." "Amanda has always been perfect, hasn't she? Well, I've always been the disappointment." "Well, at least Amanda gave us something to be proud of." The words hung in the air between us, her true feelings finally spoken aloud. "I see," I said quietly. "So my career, my independence, my life choices, none of that makes you proud." "Proud of what? Running away to New York to draw pictures while cutting yourself off from your family, living alone at your age without a thought of settling down. What exactly should I be proud of, Delia?" Each word hit like a physical blow. I'd known she felt this way, but hearing it spoken so plainly was different. "I built a successful career doing what I love," I said, my voice shaking. "I thought that might count for something." "A real career is something that contributes to society, not making things look pretty." She waved her hand dismissively at my computer screen. "Amanda is bringing new life into the world. She's marrying a wonderful man with a stable job. She visits, she calls, she cares about this family. And I dropped everything to come here when Dad got sick. After 5 years of barely speaking to us, and now you're here. You hide in your room with your computer instead of helping with wedding plans or spending time with your father." "I'm working, and I spend plenty of time with Dad. We talk every day while you're running errands." "Talk about what your father doesn't understand your world any more than I do." The argument escalated, each of us raising our voices. I heard my father call weakly from downstairs, asking what was happening, but neither of us answered him. "You've never tried to understand me," I said, tears threatening. You've never once visited me in New York or asked to see my work or acted like my choices were valid. Because they're not. Look at you, Delia. 34, and what do you have to show for it? No husband, no children, no real home. Just drawings on a computer and an overpriced apartment. I have a career I love, friends who accept me, a life I built myself. A selfish life. While your sister is creating a family continuing our legacy. What are you doing? Drawing furniture ads. How does that compare? And then it came the moment that would change everything between us. You know what, Delia? No one wants you here. I even hate you sometimes for what you've done to this family. The room went silent. I stared at her, unable to process what I'd just heard. My own mother had just said she hated me. The ultimate confirmation of what I'd always suspected, but hoped wasn't true. From downstairs, I heard movement. My father appeared in the doorway, his face pale. "Janet," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "you don't mean that." But she didn't take it back. She stood there, her chest heaving, something like regret flickering across her face before hardening into resolve. In that moment, something broke between us that I wasn't sure could ever be repaired. I don't remember much about the next few hours. I walked past my father, ignoring his outstretched hand, and locked myself in my room like the teenager I'd once been. I lay on my bed staring at the ceiling, feeling the hot tears slide down my temples into my hair. I even hate you. The words played on repeat in my mind, confirmation of my deepest fear that my own mother found me unlovable. That no matter what I achieved or who I became, I would never be enough in her eyes. Around midnight, when the house had gone quiet, I called Zoe, my best friend since college. Despite the late hour, she answered immediately. "What's wrong?" she asked, instantly alert to the tone of my voice. I told her everything, the words tumbling out between sobs, the constant criticism, the favoritism, and finally the devastating declaration of hatred. "Oh, Delia," she sighed when I finished. "I'm so sorry. There's no excuse for that. What do I do now? I can't stay here, but I can't just leave my dad. What do you want to do? Not what you feel obligated to do, but what you actually want." The question stopped me short. What did I want? I'd spent so long trying to either please my mother or defy her that I wasn't sure I knew anymore. I want... I hesitated. I want her to see me. Really see me. I want her to understand that her words hurt. I want to stop feeling like I'm 16 and desperate for approval. "Then maybe that's what you need to focus on," Zoe said thoughtfully. "Not changing her because you probably can't, but changing how you respond to her, setting boundaries." Boundaries. I repeated the word, feeling foreign on my tongue when it came to family. "Yes, you're not a child anymore, Delia. You're a successful adult. You don't need her approval to validate your choices." We talked for another hour, Zoe helping me process my emotions and consider my options. By the time we hung up, the first glimmers of a plan were forming in my mind. Instead of packing my bags and fleeing as I'd done so many times before, what if I stayed, not as the submissive daughter seeking approval, or the rebellious one lashing out, but as the adult I actually was? What if instead of engaging in the same toxic patterns, I simply refused to play the game anymore? Sleep eluded me that night. I sat at the small desk that had once held my teenage art projects and began researching. Articles about toxic parent-child relationships, books about setting boundaries with family, forums where others shared similar experiences. I took notes, formulating what I began to think of as my radical authenticity experiment. The plan was simple in theory, though I knew it would be challenging in practice. 1. I would no longer seek my mother's approval or react to her disapproval. 2. I would set clear boundaries about how I expected to be treated and enforce them consistently. 3. I would build connections outside the family that affirmed my value. 4. I would remain honest and authentic about my feelings without becoming defensive. 5. I would focus on my relationship with my father, independent of my mother's influence. As dawn broke, I wrote a letter to myself, a reminder of my worth that I could return to when doubts crept in. Delia, you are enough. Your choices are valid. Your work has value. Your life in New York is not a consolation prize for failing at your mother's vision. It is the life you have built with courage and determination. You deserve respect, if not from your family, then at least from yourself. Remember that her limitations are not your failure. I folded the letter and tucked it into my wallet, a talisman against the difficult days ahead. Then I showered, dressed carefully in an outfit that made me feel confident and prepared to face my family with a new approach. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't going to run away from my mother's criticism. I was going to stay and face it, but on my terms. It was terrifying and liberating all at once. The next morning, I entered the kitchen with a sense of calm I hadn't felt in my parents' house for years. My mother was at the stove, her back stiff with lingering anger. My father sat at the table looking anxiously between us. "Good morning," I said, evenly pouring myself a cup of coffee. My mother gave a curt nod but didn't speak. My father offered a tentative smile. "Sleep okay, Delia?" he asked. "Not really," I answered honestly. "But I've made some decisions I feel good about." My mother turned then, suspicion clouding her features. She was expecting either an announcement of my departure or an apology. I offered neither. "I have a client call at 9, I said, looking directly at her. "I'll need quiet for about an hour. After that, I'd be happy to sit with Dad while you run errands." "Since when do you dictate the schedule in this house?" she asked, the familiar edge in her voice. I took a deep breath, maintaining my composure. "I'm not dictating anything. I'm communicating my needs respectfully and offering to help where I can. My work is important to me, and I need some basic consideration to do it effectively." She seemed taken aback by my calm tone and lack of defensiveness. After a moment, she gave a small shrug. "Fine. I need to go to the pharmacy anyway." It was a small victory, but it felt significant. For the first time, I had stated a boundary without apology, and she had, however, reluctantly respected it. Over the next few days, I continued my new approach. When my mother made a critical comment about my clothes, instead of either defending my choices or silently seething, I simply said, "I'm comfortable with my style, but thanks for your input." When she compared me unfavorably to Amanda, I replied, "Amanda and I are different people with different paths. I'm happy for her success." My mother didn't know how to respond to this new version of me. She was used to either my acquiescence or my angry defiance, not this calm assertion of boundaries. Her confusion gave me space to implement other parts of my plan. I started volunteering at the Millfield Community Center, teaching a twice-weekly design workshop for teenagers interested in creative careers. It was initially just a way to get out of the house, but I quickly found it rewarding. These kids were hungry for guidance from someone who had actually built a career in a creative field. Their enthusiasm reminded me of my younger self and reinforced the value of the path I'd chosen. "You're really good with them," remarked Tony, the center's director, after my third session. "They respect you. We don't get many professionals willing to share their expertise like this." His words were a balm after years of having my career diminished. Here was someone who saw value in exactly what my mother dismissed. At home, I created a workspace at the dining room table during specific hours, placing a small sign that read, "Work in progress," to signal when I needed focus. To my surprise, my father became an unexpected ally in enforcing this boundary. "Janet, Delia's working now." He would gently remind my mother when she started to interrupt. "Let's talk about that garden issue instead." It was the first time I could remember him directly intervening in our dynamic. When I thanked him later, he squeezed my hand. "I should have done that years ago," he admitted. "I was wrong to let her treat you that way." My sister remained distant, but watched these changes with growing curiosity. When she came over to discuss wedding plans and witnessed me calmly maintaining my boundaries with our mother, I caught her studying me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You seem different," she said when we found ourselves alone in the kitchen. "I am different," I replied. "I'm trying to be more authentic about who I am and what I need." She nodded slowly. "Must be nice to be so certain." There was something in her voice, a hint of wistfulness, that made me wonder if her perfect life was as perfect as it appeared. Not everything went smoothly, of course. My mother tested my boundaries constantly, sometimes deliberately. There were moments when I faltered, slipping back into old patterns of defensiveness or people-pleasing. When that happened, I would retreat to the local library, where I'd set up an alternative workspace to regroup and remind myself of my goals. I began documenting my journey through private audio recordings each night, speaking honestly about my struggles and small victories. The act of articulating my experience helped me process my emotions and stay committed to my approach. Day 14 of the experiment. I recorded one evening. Mom tried to guilt me into canceling my workshop to help with wedding errands. I suggested an alternative time I could help instead. She wasn't happy, but she accepted it. I didn't feel guilty afterward, which feels like progress. The workshop went great. One of the students, Maya, showed real talent with typography. It felt good to encourage her the way Mrs. Lawson once encouraged me. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the dynamic in the house began to shift. My mother's criticisms didn't stop, but they lost some of their power over me. My father seemed to stand taller, no longer just a peacekeeper, but occasionally an active participant in family discussions. Even my sister began to show glimpses of a person beneath the perfect daughter persona. But the real test was yet to come. 2 weeks into my new approach, Amanda's engagement party arrived. It was being held at my parents' house with extended family and friends from all over town invited to celebrate. My mother had been planning it, obsessively determined that everything would be perfect for her perfect daughter. "I need you to help set up the decorations," she informed me the morning of the party. Not a request, but a command. "I'd be happy to help," I replied. "I can do that after my client call ends at 11. Her lips tightened. "That doesn't leave much time. The party starts at 3. 4 hours should be plenty," I said calmly. "And I've already designed the place cards and menu like you asked." She wanted to argue I could tell, but my reasonable tone made it difficult. "Fine," she conceded, "but I need you dressed appropriately. None of those artsy New York outfits." In the past, I would have either agreed resentfully or stormed off in anger. Instead, I simply said, "I've brought a nice dress that's both appropriate and expresses my personal style. I'm sure it will be fine." My client call ran long, ending closer to noon than 11. When I emerged from my room, my mother was in full stress mode, directing my father on furniture arrangement while checking items off her list. "You're late," she snapped when she saw me. "The call ran over," I explained, rolling up my sleeves. "What needs doing first?" She thrust a box of decorations at me. "These need to go up, and then the food needs to be arranged on the platters, and the drinks table needs setting up. There's not enough time now." I took the box calmly. "We'll get it done. Why don't you focus on the food? Dad can handle the drinks, and I'll take care of the decorations." My organized response seemed to throw her. She'd been expecting either an apology or a defensive reaction, not a solution. After a moment, she nodded curtly and turned her attention to the catering delivery that had just arrived. By 2:30, the house was transformed. White and silver decorations adorned the living and dining rooms. Food was artfully arranged on platters. A drink station was set up on the porch to take advantage of the spring weather. Everything looked beautiful, if a bit conventional for my taste. I went upstairs to change into my dress, a deep blue wrap style that was elegant but distinctly more vibrant than the pastels my mother preferred. When I came downstairs, she frowned. "That's what you're wearing?" "Yes," I said simply. "I think it looks nice." Before she could argue further, the doorbell rang. The first guest had arrived. For the next hour, I played the role of dutiful daughter, greeting relatives and family friends, accepting condescending comments about my artistic career with grace, and deflecting questions about my love life. I helped serve drinks and made small talk, all while maintaining the calm, boundaried presence I'd been practicing. Amanda and Brad arrived to much fanfare, my sister glowing in a pale pink dress that emphasized her small baby bump. My mother orbited around her, introducing and reintroducing her to guests as if she were royalty. I didn't mind. I was genuinely happy for Amanda, and the distance from my mother's attention gave me space to breathe. The trouble began when it was time for toasts. My father spoke first, his voice warm with pride as he welcomed Brad to the family and expressed his joy at becoming a grandfather. Several of Brad's family members followed with humorous stories and good wishes. Then my mother took the microphone. She spoke beautifully about Amanda, her voice thick with emotion as she described her pride in the woman her younger daughter had become. She talked about Amanda's accomplishments, her perfect choice in Brad, and how she was continuing the family legacy with the coming baby. It was a lovely speech, but as it continued, I felt increasingly invisible. Not once did she mention having two daughters. Not once did she acknowledge my presence or contribution to the day. To anyone who didn't know better, I might have been just another guest rather than Amanda's sister. I shouldn't have been surprised. This erasure was familiar, but something about seeing it performed so publicly after 2 weeks of working to establish my worth in this family hit differently. I felt a lump form in my throat. As applause followed her speech, my mother's gaze fell on me. Something in my expression must have betrayed my hurt because her eyes narrowed slightly. She approached where I stood near the drinks table. "The ice is getting low," she said, as if she hadn't just publicly excluded me from our family narrative. "Could you get more from the garage freezer?" It was such a small thing, a simple request. But coming on the heels of that speech, it felt like yet another dismissal. I took a deep breath, centering myself. "I'll get it in a minute," I said. I was actually hoping to offer a toast to Amanda and Brad myself. Her expression shifted to alarm. "Oh, I think we've had enough toasts. People want to eat and socialize now." "It will just take a minute," I assured her, moving toward where my father stood with the microphone. She caught my arm, her fingers digging in slightly. "Delia, this isn't the time for one of your dramatic moments." The accusation stung. I hadn't had a dramatic moment since arriving despite ample provocation. I had been nothing but measured and reasonable in my interactions. "I'm not being dramatic," I said, keeping my voice low. "I just want to congratulate my sister. That's normal." "You'll make it about you somehow," she hissed. "You always do." That was the moment something snapped. Not in a way that made me lose control, but in a way that made everything suddenly crystalline clear. This wasn't about my behavior. It never had been. No matter how I acted, my mother would always see me through a lens of her own creation. "This is exactly the problem," I said, my voice steady but carrying enough that several nearby guests turned to look. "You've decided who I am, and nothing I do will ever change that perception." "Not here, Delia," she warned, glancing around at the curious onlookers. "Where then, when we've been having the same conversation behind closed doors for 34 years and nothing changes?" My mother's face flushed. "You're making a scene at your sister's engagement party. This is exactly the selfish behavior I'm talking about." Selfish. The word hit a nerve. I dropped everything to come here when Dad got sick. I've been helping for weeks while trying to salvage my career that you constantly undermine. I spent hours helping with this party. How exactly am I selfish? My voice had risen despite my best efforts at control. Around us, conversations had stopped. From the corner of my eye, I could see my father moving toward us, concern on his face. Amanda stood frozen near the center of the room, Brad's arm protectively around her shoulders. "You've always been difficult," my mother said, her voice tight. "Always demanding attention, always different, always challenging everything instead of just fitting in like Amanda." "Different isn't wrong, Mom, it's just different." "It is when it hurts this family," she snapped. "Your constant rebellion, your inappropriate career choice moving so far away, cutting us off for years. I moved away to build a life that made me happy. I stayed away because coming home meant enduring exactly this constant criticism and comparison." "Stop it, both of you," my father interjected, reaching us at last. This isn't the time or place. But years of suppressed hurt had found their voice, and I couldn't stop now. "You said you hated me," I said to my mother, the room now silent around us. "Do you have any idea what that does to a daughter?" To hear her mother say that, gasps from several guests. My mother's face paled. "I didn't mean it," she said, quickly glancing around at the shocked faces. "Delia is exaggerating. We had a small disagreement, that's all." "You said no one wants you here, I even hate you." I quoted, my voice surprisingly steady. "Those were your exact words. After a lifetime of making me feel like I was never good enough, never the daughter you wanted." "That's not true," she protested, but her voice lacked conviction. "Isn't it? You've compared me to Amanda since we were children. You've dismissed my career, my choices, my entire life in New York as some sort of phase or failure. You've never once visited me there, or shown any interest in understanding my world." My mother looked around desperately, clearly hoping someone would intervene. But the room remained uncomfortably silent. Even my father stood quietly, making no move to stop me. "I have tried so hard," I continued, my voice breaking slightly. "I came back to help when Dad got sick. I've been trying to rebuild some kind of relationship with this family, but nothing I do is ever enough for you." To my surprise, it was my Aunt Meredith, my mother's sister, who spoke next. "Janet," she said quietly, "the girl has a point. I've watched how you treat her for years." My mother's head whipped around, betrayal in her eyes. "What are you talking about? You've always been harder on Delia. We've all seen it. I've tried to talk to you about it before, but you never listen." "That's ridiculous," my mother sputtered. "I've treated both my daughters exactly the same." "No, you haven't." My father's voice was soft but firm. Everyone turned to look at him in surprise. He rarely contradicted my mother, especially in public. "You've expected Delia to be someone she's not, and when she couldn't be that person, you made her feel like a failure." The room was so quiet you could hear the clock ticking on the mantel. My mother stared at my father as if he'd grown a second head. "Robert, you can't possibly think—" "I do," he interrupted. "I've thought it for years. I just didn't have the courage to say it. I was wrong to stay silent, and I'm sorry for that, Delia." His apology, offered so publicly and sincerely, brought tears to my eyes. "Thank you, Dad." My mother looked around the room, her face flushed with humiliation as she realized she had lost the narrative control she valued so highly. Her gaze fell on Amanda. "Amanda, tell them. Tell them I've been a good mother to both of you." All eyes turned to my sister, who looked like she wanted to disappear. For a moment, I felt sorry for putting her in this position. But then she straightened, one hand resting protectively over her belly. "Mom," she said softly, "you know I love you. But Delia's right. You've always treated us differently." The shock on my mother's face was almost comical. "What? How can you say that I've always supported you?" "Yes, you have," Amanda agreed. "Because I did exactly what you wanted. I followed your plan for my life. But whenever Delia tried to follow her own path, you punished her for it." "That's not true," my mother insisted, but her voice had lost its certainty. "It is true," Amanda continued, growing bolder. "And there's something else you should know." She took a deep breath. "I've always been jealous of Delia." Now it was my turn to be shocked. "Jealous of me? Why?" Amanda gave a small, sad smile. "Because you had the courage to be yourself, to follow your passion despite the pressure. Do you know how many times I've wondered if the life I'm living is really mine, or just the one Mom designed for me?" My mother sank into a nearby chair, her face ashen. "Amanda, you don't mean that. You're happy. You have everything." "I am happy," Amanda acknowledged. "I love Brad, and I'm excited about the baby. But sometimes I wonder who I might have been if I'd had Delia's courage to explore other paths." A heavy silence fell over the room. Guests shifted uncomfortably, clearly wishing they were anywhere but witnessing this family implosion. I felt a strange mix of vindication and sadness. This wasn't how I'd wanted things to unfold, but maybe it was necessary. My mother looked up at me, her expression unreadable. "Is this what you wanted? To humiliate me in front of everyone? To turn my family against me?" The accusation stung, but I refused to accept blame for a situation years in the making. "No, Mom. What I wanted was to be seen and accepted for who I actually am. What I wanted was a mother who could love both her daughters for their differences, not despite them." I glanced around at the uncomfortable faces of our guests, suddenly tired of the public nature of this confrontation. Whatever happened next between my mother and me didn't need an audience. "I think I should go," I said quietly. "Amanda, Brad, I'm sorry. I truly am happy for you both." My sister nodded, her eyes wet with tears. Brad looked confused, but gave me a small nod of acknowledgement. I turned and walked out the front door, ignoring my mother's voice calling after me. I had said what needed saying, Now I needed space to process what had happened and decide what came next. For the first time in my life, I walked away from my family not in anger or hurt, but with a strange sense of peace. I had finally stood in my truth, regardless of the consequences. Whatever happened next, I would face it as the person I actually was, not the daughter my mother had always wanted me to be. The next morning, I checked into the Millfield Inn, the same hotel where I'd fled to after our last major fight years ago. This time, though, I wasn't running away. I was simply giving everyone space to process what had happened while maintaining my commitment to helping my father and continuing my volunteer work. The aftermath of the engagement party unfolded slowly. My father called first, his voice concerned but supportive. "Are you okay, Delia?" "I'm fine, Dad. Just needed some space. I'm sorry about the party." "Don't be. It's been coming for a long time." He paused. "Your mother is struggling. But I think maybe that's necessary." My sister texted next. "Can we talk just us?" We met at a cafe downtown away from family ears. Amanda looked tired, the pregnancy and family drama taking their toll. "I meant what I said," she began without preamble, "about being jealous of your courage." "I was always jealous of you," I admitted. "You seemed to know exactly what you wanted and how to get it." She gave a humorless laugh. "What I wanted was Mom's approval. I built my life around it." "Are you saying you're unhappy with your choices?" I asked carefully. "No, not exactly. I love Brad and I want this baby." Her hand went to her stomach automatically. "But sometimes I wonder if I could have been more, done more. I was good at science, you know. I thought about medical research, not just the safe local nursing program Mom pushed me toward." The revelation shifted something in how I saw my sister. All these years, I'd cast her as the antagonist in my story, the golden child who made me look bad by comparison. I'd never considered that she might have her own struggles with our mother's controlling nature. "It's not too late," I said gently. "You can still pursue those interests alongside your family." "Maybe," she smiled faintly. "I've been thinking about that more since you came back. Seeing how you've built this whole life on your terms. It's inspiring, even if Mom doesn't see it that way." Our conversation continued for hours, the first real sister talk we'd had in perhaps our entire lives. We shared memories from different perspectives, laughed over childhood mishaps, and grieved for the relationship we might have had without our mother's triangulation. By the time we parted, something new had begun between us. Not instant closeness, but the foundation for a real relationship, independent of our family dynamics. Meanwhile, I found an affordable month-to-month rental apartment in town. I moved my things from my parents' house while my mother was out leaving a note explaining that I thought some separation would be good for everyone, but that I was still committed to helping with my father's recovery. I established a new routine: mornings, working remotely afternoons with my father, or teaching at the community center evenings in my quiet apartment, developing my portfolio. The distance from my family home gave me perspective and peace. I could engage with my parents on my terms, leaving when interactions became toxic. Therapy helped too. I found a local counselor specializing in family dynamics who helped me understand the patterns I'd been caught in for decades. Dr. Ellis was insightful, but challenging, pushing me to examine my own contributions to the family dysfunction without excusing my mother's behavior. "Setting boundaries isn't about controlling others," she reminded me during one session. "It's about deciding what you will and won't accept in your life." My father improved steadily, taking daily walks that grew longer each week. I often joined him, our conversations ranging from his health to my work to tentative discussions about the family situation. "I failed you," he said during one such walk about 3 weeks after the engagement party. "I saw how your mother treated you, and I didn't do enough to stop it." "Why didn't you?" I asked the question I'd wondered my entire life. He sighed heavily. "Fear, mostly. Fear of conflict. Fear of losing her. Your mother is, when she's happy, she's like sunshine. I built my life around keeping that sunshine. But I didn't realize the shadow it cast on you." His honesty was both painful and healing. "I appreciate you acknowledging that," I said. "It matters." My mother remained distant, declining my invitations to talk. I continued to visit my father when I knew she would be out leaving before she returned. It wasn't ideal, but it maintained peace while I figured out what kind of relationship was possible between us. Then, about a month after the engagement party, my father called. "Your mother wants to have lunch with you, just the two of you." I felt immediate anxiety. "Why now?" "She's been talking to Meredith," he explained, "and I think she's starting to understand some things. Will you give her a chance?" Despite my reservations, I agreed. We met at a restaurant downtown Neutral Territory, where neither of us would have the home court advantage. My mother looked older somehow, the events of recent weeks having taken their toll. We ordered awkwardly, making stilted small talk about the weather and my father's health until our food arrived. "I've been thinking about what happened," she finally said, pushing her salad around her plate. "About what you said, what everyone said." I waited, giving her space to continue. "I've always wanted the best for you," she said. "Everything I did was because I wanted you to have a good life." It wasn't quite an apology, more of a justification. "I know you believe that," I said carefully, "but you decided what best meant without ever asking me what I wanted or needed." She frowned slightly. "Parents have to guide their children, make decisions for them. When they're young, yes, but I'm 34, Mom. I've been an adult making my own choices for a long time now." "Choices that took you away from your family," she said, a hint of the old resentment creeping into her voice. I took a deep breath, reminding myself of my boundaries. "Choices that helped me build a life that fulfills me. Isn't that what parents should want for their children? Fulfillment and happiness." She was silent for a long moment. "I suppose I always thought those things would come from the same sources for you as they did for me. Family, stability, community. They come from different sources for different people," I said gently. "My work fulfills me in ways you might not understand, because it's not your passion, just like your role as a mother and community organizer might not fulfill me in the same way." She nodded slowly, though I could tell she was still struggling with the concept. "Meredith says I've been unfair to you, that I favored Amanda because she was easier to understand." "And what do you think?" I pressed. She sighed heavily. "I think perhaps I've been afraid of your independence. Your willingness to walk away from everything familiar terrified me. I thought if I made you doubt your choices, you might come back to what I understood." It wasn't a full acknowledgement of her behavior, but it was more self-awareness than she'd ever shown before. "That makes sense," I said. "But it hurt me deeply, Mom, especially when you said you hated me." Tears filled her eyes. "I didn't mean that. I was angry and frustrated, but I never hated you. I just didn't know how to reach you anymore. You could have tried accepting me as I am, instead of trying to change me into someone else." The conversation continued, moving between difficult truths and tentative understanding. There was no dramatic reconciliation, no tearful embrace where all was forgiven. My mother was still my mother with all her flaws and fixed perspectives, but there was a new willingness to at least try to see things differently. "I'd like us to try again," she said as we finished our meal. "I can't promise I'll understand all your choices, but I can try to respect that they're yours to make." It wasn't everything, but it was a start. "I'd like that too," I said, "but things have to be different. I need you to respect my boundaries, my career, my life choices. Can you do that?" "I can try," she said, which was perhaps the most honest answer she could give. As summer approached, a new normal began to take shape. My father's health improved to the point where he no longer needed daily assistance. My remote work arrangement became permanent, giving me flexibility about where to live. My volunteer teaching expanded to include adult classes in digital design basics. I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. I decided to stay in Millfield, at least for now. Not in my parents' house, but in my own apartment. Not as the prodigal daughter returned, but as an independent adult, choosing to be near family while maintaining healthy boundaries. My reasons were complex. Part of it was my growing connection with the community center and the students who looked to me for guidance. Part was the unexpected closeness developing with my sister as she prepared for motherhood. And part, I had to admit, was a desire to finally heal the old wounds with my mother, rather than just escaping them. The relationship with my mother remained a work in progress. Some days were better than others. She still made critical comments sometimes, then caught herself with a quick apology. I still occasionally retreated into defensive silence before remembering to assert my boundaries calmly. We were both learning, stumbling toward a new kind of relationship neither of us had experienced before. My career flourished unexpectedly in this new arrangement. My agency valued my work enough to keep me on remotely, and being in a smaller market actually brought in new clients who appreciated access to big city design experience at local rates. I set up a small studio in my apartment and even hired an intern for my community center class. Most importantly, I stopped defining myself in opposition to my mother's expectations. For so long, I'd made choices partly to prove her wrong or to assert my independence. Now, I made them simply because they were right for me. The freedom in that realization was profound. 6 months after that explosive engagement party, Amanda gave birth to a healthy baby girl. At the hospital, our mother hovered proudly, but with a new awareness of boundaries I'd never seen before. When she began giving unsolicited advice about breastfeeding, Amanda calmly said, "I appreciate your experience, Mom, but I'm going to follow what works for me and the baby." To my amazement, our mother nodded and stepped back. Later in the hospital cafeteria, she sat beside me with a cup of mediocre coffee. "She sounds like you now," she said, a mix of pride and wistfulness in her voice. "Is that such a bad thing?" I asked. She considered this, then shook her head. "No, it's actually quite remarkable to see both my daughters knowing their own minds so clearly." She hesitated, then added, "I'm sorry it took me so long to appreciate that quality in you, Delia." It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was genuine. And in that moment, I realized that I no longer needed her perfect understanding or approval to feel whole. I learned that sometimes the bravest thing isn't walking away, but staying present while refusing to accept mistreatment. My worth was never determined by my mother's inability to see it. It was always there waiting for me to recognize and claim it for myself. Have you ever had to stand up to someone you love to protect yourself? It's one of the hardest things to do, but sometimes it's the only way forward. I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. And if my journey resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories about finding strength in unexpected places. Thank you for listening. And remember that your worth isn't determined by other people's limitations.